Chapter 2.
You were a pony?
Your last name is Wheat?
Princess Luna is your mom?
Yes, and yes. But all this was a very long time ago.
But I don't see what this has to do with knights.
You'll see. But not for a while. Midnight crept cautiously through the unknown section of the forest. As her heart raced, she observed this new place and noted all the many differences to her usual stomping grounds. The forest's large dark trees, that usually were spaced enough to see the night sky, was thick and loomed over the hungry wolf as if to swallow her up, as it did the stars and the night sky. The trees were also thicker, with gnarly appearances and sizes. Calls let out from animals she had never heard of before, as Midnight felt herself flinch and tremble at the thought of any one of them swooping in to snatch her up. Her trembling also, she would admit, was part in due to her thinner summer coat, now soaked from all the dew and water on the ground from the rain that had recently finished. Fighting through her fear, though, Midnight sniffed around to see if she could find any scent of carrion from some long-dead beast. Her nose, which she had found long ago, was much greater than any pony's was, caught many scents that filled the air like a thick fog. There were vibrant flowers of yellow and purple, just starting to pollinate. There was a decaying log not far from here that had many worms and beetles in it, and of course, there was some animal's business that she could tell had been left there long ago, and surely wasn't good for hunting. Her eyes flicked back, and she sighed as she guessed it would be a meal of larvae and butterflies again, if no possible food was nearby. A loud roar let out suddenly, and Midnight fell straight to the ground in a crouch. Though she could tell the roar was far off, Midnight whimpered and quickly continued onwards, knowing that if she did not, she herself would soon be a meal for something else. After a long while, she started to think it might not have been a good idea to go so far from her den. The large trees seemed to blend together, looking more and more like the ones she had passed. She had no way of telling how far from her den she had travelled, or if she had walked in circles without even knowing. The stars, which over the years she had used to find her way home countless times, were still hidden by the trees. Her fear rose at the uncertainty of finding her way home, became more and more apparent to her. Midnight was about to give up and try and turn around when an unfamiliar scent crossed her nose. She raised her muzzle into the air to get a stronger sample of the scent. As she closed her eyes and focused and processed this new smell, her fear slowly melted away as she opened her eyes and furrowed her brow in great confusion. There were 3 new scents, each somewhat strong around this new section of the wood, which Midnight had guessed was due to the fact that this was probably their territory. What confused Midnight was not that the land was no doubt their territory, but more the fact that these were some of the strangest scents she had ever smelled before, and that's saying much considering where she lived. The first scent smelled of a creature she somewhat knew, a pony. But the smell was light and engulfed by the smell of what she thought was a bug. An uneasiness came over her as she blinked, trying to think how a pony could smell like a bug, but pushed it aside as she thought of the second scent. That scent was from what she guessed was a small animal, one that seemed to burrow like that of a rabbit and groundhogs that lived in the Everfree. She couldn't place her mind on what it was, but she lifted her snout once more to re-smell the last scent. Her eyes shot in great surprise as she smelled what she thought was a wolf. But it couldn't have been a wolf. It smelled far too big. On top of that, Midnight could have sworn she smelt feathers too. No wolf she had ever seen or heard of ever had feathers. As Midnight thought about these 3 new and odd smells, her mind raced with curiosity about the new possibilities these creatures could bring. The more she thought of new adventures and experiences danced within her mind, her fear and hunger slowly melted away like winter thaw. She quickly set off to follow the scent as best she could. Though without any training, Midnight found herself getting quite lost one too many times. It was only when she would sniff a rock or a section of a log and start to find the scents again did she get back on track in her search for adventure. She jumped over tree trunks that lay dead on the ground, followed the edges of babbling brooks and rivers, and even clambered over rocks as big as her. After what she could guess was hours of searching, the scents finally grew incredibly strong as she noticed the forest slowly open up, and the light of the wondrous night bathed her. Stopping to catch her bearings with the star's aid, she gasped as she realized that the star she was looking at could only be seen in this way if she was on the other side of the Everfree. "No wonder I don't recognize anything. I've never been this far from my den before," she muttered, as she sniffed again and followed the scents that now were so thick it clung to the air like fog. She kept going as she finally came to an opening in a tree line, which led her to a great rocky mountain. Midnight had never seen this mountain up close. However, even from far away, she was sure she could have noticed the large stone path that had been carved into the side of it. Looking up the path, she could see it led to an opening in the mountain, near what looked like the middle of the mountain. From below it seemed not that big a hole. She was sure much closer it would be far bigger than she imagined. Curiosity still driving her thoughts, Midnight walked up the mountain path, wondering what beast would shun living in the soft embrace of the forest grasses and floors to solely live in the cold, harsh mountain range. Granted, Midnight knew she too lived in a cave, but Midnight had filled it with so many soft things it felt less like a cave and more like a cozy room in a castle. As she tiredly continued her climb up the path, she started to think of the other creatures that might live in the mountains. Dragons? Midnight thought, as she examined the hole. Although it was big, she admitted, it was far too small for any dragon she had ever seen in her travels. Though she had never the guts to meet a dragon, she had watched ones from great distances and knew they were like mountains themselves in size. Plus, in all the centuries she had lived, only a few dragons had chosen to live here, and that one died 100 years ago. On top of that, Midnight remembered Luna showing her and telling her that dragons smelled like burnt leather, a smell that was definitely missing from this mountain path. Her mind raced as she thought of more possible animals she had encountered, as she tiredly continued her trek up the cold stone path, getting closer and closer to the end of her journey. When she finally reached the top of the ledge, her mouth agaped, and saw the cave was indeed much bigger than her. In fact, it was most likely big enough to fit a whole adult dragon head inside comfortably, without much worry. The fear that was once shoved deep down inside her shot up like a firecracker, when she realized that whatever lived in here might see her as nothing more than a tasty snack. But as they say, curiosity killed the cat, or wolf in this case, and Midnight pushed onwards into the cave so she could see the inside better. Much to her surprise, Midnight found the cave to be nothing like she had ever seen. In simple terms, the cave was beautiful and strong. Paintings, though many simple in design, decorated all the walls and were given great care from what Midnight could guess. The paintings themselves, she marveled at simply for the fact that there were many animals she had never seen before in her life. Strange beasts with strange looks and colours. Beside the paintings was a bookshelf filled to the brim with books double the size of normal books she had read in her time, with strange writing on them. A straw bed that seemed prickly, and carts at the back of the cave large enough to carry 3 ponies, one after the other, and another large entrance to a hallway. She noticed, unlike in her home, there were no blankets, no pillows, nothing soft, just hard dirt below her paws, and prickly straw that admittedly looked not so comfortable. As she observed all she could, Midnight quickly made her way into the new hallway. Her curiosity greeted her with more colourful paintings as the dirt road twisted and turned. Some of these paintings she recognized from her books, her travels, and Luna explaining to her ferocious dragons, hydras of gargantuous size, manticores that looked more noble than she'd ever seen them, even great and magnificent sea serpents who seemed to almost leap off the wall. But for every one she recognized, there were more she didn't, and the more she didn't recognize, the more excited she got. As she came to a wide, equally tall opening filled with many tunnels and many more wondrous paintings, her curiosity in who owned this hollow piqued even more as she felt her tail wag in excitement. The room had more corridors leading off into different directions deep within the mountain. It was much like the beginning of a maze, and Midnight knew it would be difficult to find her way out. As she looked at the paintings carefully again, a thought jumped to her mind. These paintings, Midnight noticed, seemed fresh, making Midnight to mentally note that the owner of this cave was probably new to the forest. Come to think of it, Midnight realized that whatever this beast was, it was not your average beast. The creature has clearly travelled here from quite far away, and have gained a lot of knowledge of creatures beyond Equestria's borders, enough to paint them on the wall of their own home in semi-detail. Perhaps if I ask them really nicely, they'll decorate my home. Midnight wondered, as Midnight knew she was no artist, and had very little drawing skills, though they were improving. As she started to walk down another corridor, her stomach rumbled again, and a shot of pain ran through her, making her whine. Her ears flicked back as she heard the whine and stomach growl echoing throughout the cave. Realizing she needed something to eat before the night was out, she looked around, pushing her curiosity to the side so she could smell the cave for any sign of food nearby. At first she could smell nothing besides dirt and dust, making her ears flick back in disappointment, before a new scent caught her attention. Carrion, and not that long dead either. As the smell filled her snout more and more, her mouth drooled excessively as one thought filled her head. Eat. Midnight quickly sniffed each door hungrily, desperation to find the source of the smell driving her now above all else. Soon enough she found that the corridor third to her left was where the smell was coming from, and in a matter of heartbeats she found herself running at top speeds down the corridor. Within a matter of minutes she entered a room filled with something more beautiful than just paintings. Piled in boxes 1.5 times bigger than her was food of all sorts. Boxes with just plants like apples and carrots she could have sworn were from the orchard nearby. Barrels of water, smaller bags of bugs, and of course boxes filled with mouth-watering meat. Midnight ran over faster than a blink of an eye and jumped into the box, grabbing the first thing she could sink her teeth into, which, in this case, was a plump rabbit. Quickly she found herself ripping the meat off from the animal's carcass, leaving a small pile of bones in a matter of seconds. She licked her lips satisfyingly, as Midnight realized that this was the first proper meal in years she had had, and a smile grew on her face as she looked at all the other prey she could try. Just as she was about to pick up another meal from the box, a sudden sound came from down the tunnel. Listening carefully, she heard muffled sounds and steps taken from what she finally remembered were the true owners of the cave. Hoofsteps and a pair of paws came jogging down the opening corridor, and grew louder as they got closer to her tunnel. A voice, female from what she could guess, boomed down into her room, echoing around, and making the voice seem very menacing. "Okay, whoever you are, come out with your claws down. I know you're in here, so no use hiding." The voice demanded as the hoofsteps and pair of paws stopped outside the beginning of the tunnel, and one loud pair came storming down the hall straight for Midnight. Frantically looking around, Midnight desperately looked for a hiding spot, seeing that the only quick hiding spot was down in the crate. Midnight dived inside to hide under the many carcasses as she could, and hoped to Luna above that the animal would not find her. Moving down deep enough so a few rabbits were above her, Midnight moved so she could look through a small hole in the box to see who or what she was up against. As she saw 4 white paws step into the room, her eyes widened in fear at seeing the original occupant of the home, and boy did she wish she had not eaten that rabbit. There stood in front of Midnight, at the opening of the tunnel, was a great wolf and not just any wolf at that, but a winged wolf. As tall as Celestia, she guessed. This winged wolf had a white and silver pattern, a stripe from her chest and belly all the way covering her tail, silver tips on each of her feathers, and a big silver star on her left eye. But the markings were not the only thing Midnight noticed about this strange creature. Right in the middle of her chest lay a medallion, darker grey than her fur, with an engraving of some kind on it that was too far for Midnight to see. A thick dark blue ribbon or sash that in colour at least matched her eyes held the medallion in place and looked like a collar over the great creature. But even that was not what Midnight focused on the most. What drew Midnight's attention the most was the large set of sharp black claws on each paw, and a sickening darkish pink scar on her back left leg. As Midnight saw the winged wolf scan the room slowly, she felt her body practically vibrate in fear of being found by this beast. When the winged wolf locked eyes on the box and started to walk over, Midnight's heart sank right to her paws. It didn't take long for the winged wolf to make its way over to the box and push the remaining rabbits off of Midnight, exposing her from her hiding space, and being frozen by fear. Midnight held her breath as the winged wolf stared at her with, though it felt impossible for Midnight to think, a look of shock on the great beast's face. Midnight, still frozen, saw the winged wolf slowly move its snout into the box and pick her up by the scruff. The sensation of being picked up by the scruff at the time was very foreign to Midnight, almost feeling like a form of levitation minus the magic. Midnight slowly was carried from the box and placed gently on the floor, her tail still fiercely tucked, and her ears still flat back. Midnight, slow as sap, turned to face the great winged wolf. But instead of being faced by the sight of a bloodthirsty monster that Midnight was expecting, all she saw in the winged wolf's face was wide-eyed surprise. Blinking a few times, the winged wolf said in a quiet voice, "A puppy?" Before the creature took a few steps back and did something Midnight was sure could only have happened in a dream. The winged wolf barked twice and got into a play crouch, one not uncommon of that she would have seen a common dog do. Midnight couldn't believe this. This had to be a dream, right? Some illusion from hunger. Had she gone mad, perhaps? There she was about to be eaten by a giant winged wolf, and yet here it was almost seeming like it wanted to play with her? As Midnight stared, mouth agape, eyes blinking slowly, her ears perked up at the sound of a small pair of paws clambering from the tunnel and the sound of hoofsteps trotting down the tunnel. Still with her mouth agape and eyes wide, she turned around to see who else was joining this circus of insanity. A small creature like she had suspected, and a pony. The pony had a light blue base with lighter markings all over her, almost like that of bubbles and circles. Some of her coat was covered in a thick grey sweater that fit her snugly but comfortably. She had dark green eyes and a brown mane and tail. Much like the bubbles on the mare's coat, Midnight noted the mare seemed to be bubbly in personality from the little she had seen. The other creature, the smaller one, was a brown raccoon with a tan and beige face. Much like the winged wolf, this creature had a few markings: dark grey socked legs, with the dark grey stripe from its back to the top part of its tail, with white markings on the top of its muzzle and a white star on its forehead. Sported a pair of heterochromia eyes, the left light blue and the right brown. Still shocked, Midnight looked back and forth between the two groups, faster with each look, before staring at the winged wolf and finally letting out a very confused, "What are you doing?" Upon hearing Midnight talk, the winged wolf stopped wagging her tail in happy expression to go back to the confused one. Straightening up, the creature looked down at Midnight. The winged wolf said, "Oh, you can talk, can you? Well, this helps a lot, actually." The winged wolf tilted its head and spoke in a softer, motherly tone. "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night, little one? Where's your pack? Did something happen to them?" Midnight's ears flicked back in more confusion than fear. Pup? Pup? This Goliath thinks I'm a pup? Midnight knew she would have growled at this point, but looking at the winged wolf's sheer size made her hold her tongue and let it pass for now. Still fearful and shaky, Midnight gave a gulp, stood up, and looked at the winged wolf in the eyes. Look, I'm sorry I came here, but I haven't eaten in a while, and when I was passing by I smelt food, and I promise, I normally would have asked, I just... A motherly laugh in front of Midnight sounded out, as well as a bubbly kind of laugh and barking that sounded a bit like laughing from behind her. As Midnight saw the winged wolf smile kindly and moved her head closer to Midnight. It's perfectly all right, little one, the winged wolf said, motherly again, melting Midnight's fears away slowly. Just please, eat outside the crate next time. We don't want warm meat causing sickness now, do we? Nope, a voice said from behind, who she guessed was the pony. Otherwise we'd have another stomach flu incident like a few seasons back. Midnight could hear trotting and quick light paw steps scurrying from behind her to stand beside the winged wolf. The small creature crouched and eventually jumped onto the winged wolf's back and crawled to sit on the big wolf's head, pushing some of the skin forward and giving the winged wolf a scrunched up looking face. Midnight suppressed a giggle as best she could before she noticed a raised eyebrow from the said winged wolf, and the giggling stopped in a heartbeat. Clearing her throat to talk again, the purple wolf spoke as clear as she could. I'm Midnight, by the way. Nice to meet you, little pup. My name is Starling, Silver said as she nudged to the pony next to her. This one next to me is Powder, and the little Takuni on my head is Bandit. The pony Powder waved and smiled at Midnight as Bandit the Takuni barked once from Starling's head. Now if you don't mind, Midnight, I need you to come with me, the winged wolf said as she walked towards Midnight slowly. There's something I need to, show you, if you don't mind. Midnight instantly grew scared as images of showing her dinner that would lead to her being made into a furry meal started to flash before her eyes. When Midnight tried to back up, she saw Silver Starling flick her ears back, and in the blink of an eye, grabbed her by the scruff once again. In a quick burst of speed, Starling bolted down the tunnel and back into the main area. Midnight's fear resurfaced as she whined yet again, and flinched as she almost tossed when Starling changed directions into one of the nearby tunnels, never slowing down for a heartbeat. Like the other corridors, this one had more paintings covering them and led them to another room. This one was big, if not bigger than the last. While Midnight would have liked to look around the room more, her eyes widened to the size of saucers when she saw a giant black cauldron in the center of the room. Fear consumed Midnight, as she was sure that if she didn't get away, she would end up being killed without a doubt. Shutting her eyes, Midnight squirmed and flailed in desperation to get out of the winged wolf's hold. Midnight suddenly felt a drop and something prickly underneath her. As dust suddenly shot up the wolf's nose, making Midnight sneeze, she finally looked around her to see she was not in a soup, but in a pile of straw. Certainly not as soft as her pillow at home, but much better than the hard dirt and stone ground. Midnight looked up, bewildered to see the room around her, and what she saw made her jaw drop. Inside what she thought was a kitchen, in reality looked like a healing room. Well, if bandages, creams, and what looked like potions was any kind of giveaway. Though, subconsciously, Midnight felt her ears flick back once again at seeing beakers and test tubes, remembering all the horrible times in Starswirl's cages. Midnight tried to look past all of that and tried to look again at her full surroundings. She noticed Silver was running around grabbing different plants and vials before making a disgusting-looking green mush in a bowl. In less than 2 shakes of a lamb's tail, Silver came almost trotting over and placed the bowl in front of Midnight with a stern look. "Drink," she said in an angered tone. "Drink and tell me how the fur this happened." Midnight looked at her confused between the drink and the strange phrase, but became distracted upon hearing a canter coming down the tunnel and a muffled voice call out, "Language!" Turned out that Powder could carry a lot in her mouth for a pony her size, as the basket she came cantering in with was filled to the brim of delicious-looking meats that made Midnight start to drool once again. Before she had a chance to stand and grab any of it, though, Midnight saw Starling stand in between her. "The fur I will watch my language!" Silver started to shout back as she moved and pointed a wing at Midnight. "This pup is starving and she's probably from an abusive pack. How do you expect me to react, Powder?" Midnight, who had let the pup comment slide for a while, had finally heard it one too many times, for her liking, and finally spoke up. "Look, Goliath, I'm not a pup," was all she could say before Starling gave her an icy glare as she looked at Midnight and the bowl. "Pup, I better see you drink." "I'm not a pup!" Midnight screamed as she jumped on all fours. "I'm a fully grown wolf, and I would like it if you'd stop treating me like I'm some sort of pup!" The room was silent as both Powder and Starling stared at Midnight in great confusion. Starling narrowed her eyes at Midnight before walking over and looking her right in the eyes. "A full-grown wolf, you say?" Starling asked, an unamused look on her face. Yeah. Midnight stuttered, fear creeping a little into her voice. "And I'm guessing you live on your own, scraping by on scavenging?" Starling stated, standing up. "Well, yeah, I mean, meat-wise. I did nab a chicken almost 2 weeks ago, but then the farmers got very vigilant, and it's been harder and harder to nab one. I did get a mouse or two a few days ago, and I've been keeping the hunger off with some vegetables in my den, but—" Midnight answered, but stopped herself when she saw Starling's horrified expression and Powder drop the basket in shock. "Vegetables?" Starling roared. "Why in the claw and fur would you eat vegetables?" Silver Starling shouted louder as she moved the green potion away from Midnight, confusing the purple wolf even more. "And here I thought it was a virus I needed to cure, or maybe some disease, but vegetables? Nope. That's not going to fly. Okay, Midnight, what do you want, badger or rabbit?" Silver Starling spoke as she turned and walked over to Powder now. Rabbit, please. But why do you ask?" Midnight asked, confused. "Because," Starling said, reaching into the basket and rummaging in it, "you clearly haven't eaten in a while, which makes sense, you being a wolf without a pack. Your fur is brittle and thin, you have no sheen to it, just dull look. Not to mention, I can see a few ribs on you. You're in bad shape, and if I'm being honest, you might drop dead soon if you keep this up." Midnight's ears shot back instantly when Starling said the last part. She figured she wasn't doing well, but dropping dead? She never thought it had gotten that bad. She suddenly began to shake again, thinking about what would have happened had she not been lucky and found this cave and the crate. "Sis," Powder spoke up, "don't traumatize the wolf now, okay?" "Sis? As in sister?" Midnight thought as she saw the winged wolf shoot her ears back very fast and look guiltily at Powder. Right. Sorry, sis," Starling said in a guilty tone. Midnight saw Silver Starling grab 3 fat rabbits and drop them in front of Midnight. "You need help, and you need it soon if you're expected to survive." "So," Starling said in a motherly tone, as she walked around Midnight and laid behind her, "you're going to be under our care till you can get some weight on you, alright?" Midnight stared in shock at Starling, and she listened to all the winged wolf had just said. Had this winged wolf Goliath, who had once wanted to attack and throw her out, really offered for her to stay to get better? Midnight thought it over. This new offer of safety and food for what the purple wolf had assumed was some large price at the end of it. A thought creeped into her mind that the winged wolf was going to eat her after fattening her up. That this was some sort of big ploy to get a free meal to walk into the cave and never see the light of day again. But Midnight knew that even if it were a ploy to fatten her up, she needed to get food or else face the Grim Reaper and the cold touch of death. The choice, like that she had made earlier in the night, was clear. She needed to put trust into these strange cave owners and wait it out. When Silver Starling, who had waited patiently with a motherly face for Midnight to respond to her, gave another nod to the rabbits she placed in front of Midnight. She wasted no time in ripping into the plump rabbits quickly. As she ate, Starling chuckled and nodded to Powder and Bandit, who in turn walked out of the cave and out into the corridors once again. Soon enough, Midnight had finished all the rabbits and felt her stomach full, something she couldn't remember feeling in a long time. Soon the purple wolf had let out a loud yawn and blinked her eyes in exhaustion. Silver smiled warmly as she pushed the bones off to the side of the bed and moved, so that Midnight could curl up beside her, and so that Silver Starling could curl up around her too, like a mother with a puppy. "You've had a busy day, little one. Sleep. You have nothing to fear here. We will keep you safe and warm, I promise," Starling said in a calm, motherly tone, before giving Midnight a light nudge to curl up while she laid her head down to rest too. Midnight, feeling too tired to protest, gave another yawn, curled up tight beside the winged wolf, closing her eyes, and finally started to drift off to sleep. Just as sleep began to take her, Midnight felt the Starling's large wings shield over her and act like a blanket to keep her safe and warm. Midnight hadn't felt this safe in countless years, and she couldn't help but have a smile on her face as she slept, dreaming of the moon, dreaming of her dear Luna trapped within it, and dreaming of the events that happened all those years ago.